My name is Ben Cornelius. I'm with PayPal. I have a bit of an unusual job these days. I don't make content that's seen outside of conference rooms at PayPal, typically. And this is one of those rare occasions when something that came off of my desk actually leaves the building. So there's obviously a lot of fun and scrutiny in what we can and cannot talk about as a PayPal. So you might not see a lot of the same type of examples and such that we've seen in other presentations because I'm not allowed. It's just that easy. So instead, I'd like you to consider some business strategy in your content strategy, because if you think about it, our content strategy really should be backing up our business strategy. So let's see if we can insert some business strategy back in. It's going to help smooth things out along your journey and getting your goals met. And I don't know about you, but I've certainly heard a lot of interesting things today that makes me think about other things I'd like to get done. So let's talk about some things that we can grab and how to actually explain these things to people a little better in hopes that we can get funded and get some things done. So with that, I've got a pretty brief agenda. I'd just like to talk about a couple of things. Optics growing, some things you should consider along the way, finding friends, and I promise not to stuff a whole lot of data in until the very end. So no graphs, no big tables. We'll just do that on the last slide. Okay? All right. So let's start with, how do I want to look as a content organization? What am I hoping for from my customers, right? Well, I want to be a team of rock stars. I've got heroes making fantastic stuff that drive demand for my product, my service, my brand. But are all of my customers thinking that? Well, you probably have some customers who view things a little differently, and they need a little bit more from you, or something a little bit different, because they're looking at, how much does this cost to produce? And that's what I do at PayPal today. How can I make sure that we're not doing this in a way that we can't afford, and therefore falling short of our goals for you guys, our customers? I'm assuming that many of you use PayPal. I know I do. It's a pretty cool, useful thing. And we produce an enormous amount of content around that. Our team is responsible for all of the product content, as well as localization and other services to all of the other content teams in the organization. And that's a lot of work and a lot of folks, and of course a lot of infrastructure pieces. So we don't all want to look like this, and we certainly don't want everyone to look at us like this. Or your product is content, and in that case, well, everything looks pretty much the same. You still need to clearly show what you're doing because your customers care, your boss, your board, your investors, your bank, right? Am I doing the right thing in showing the ROI of my activity in a way that people can understand? And so that communication is really key. And we need to get that out to all of our customer groups and not just the ones that don't work at our company. So let's talk a little bit about growth. Once upon a time, it was me and my wife in our living room, right? Our overhead was pretty low. We had to pay rent anyway. I needed a new Mac. I needed some new apps. But mostly what I build out, I ate. I paid my rent with. I got most of the value of my time from my customers directly. But as your organization grows, this is really nonlinear, right? You've got a small team, a manager with a couple of teams. That team isn't bearing the whole cost, but they have now some additional overhead. And every time you grow, as you grow larger and larger, your overhead simply continues to grow as well. So if they were producing the same, I've got the same number of people in all of these phases, I should have the same output. I'm making the same margin, and it's costing me more to get there. So when folks come to me and say, look, I need something, and it looks like the red line and the green line are going to cross because of what they need, the answer is easy: no. And if you solve for this in any one dimension, then you end up with the same problem: increased cost and decreased efficiency. If you don't take a holistic view, that's where you end up. I can add tech, I can add methodology, I can add strategy, I can add actually the same categories that Phyllis showed us this morning, right? Nothing new. But this is what we need to do. And you need to make sure that it can evolve over time, because if you get locked in, the next year, your old plan won't work any longer. And we know at PayPal that this has been very true over time. We've got a lot of old code, a lot of old content, a lot of old processes, a lot of inefficiency is built up over time. And we're working really hard to get through that. So in terms of this strategy, you need to really be clear that just adding people isn't going to work. I've got to have a more holistic viewpoint and integrate a bunch of other stuff. And if reducing cost and increasing efficiency aren't part of my plan, I'm not going to get them. If I'm not planning for that, there's no reason to believe that they'll just fall out. Those are hard things to achieve. So you have to spend some effort on them, obviously. And when folks come and say, look, I'd really like to grow. I've got this great idea, and I need to hire 6 people. Okay. Why? Why would we do that? Is there something coming out of that that's going to be awesome for the organization, for the group, for the company, for the logo? Why? And when folks come and ask this again and again and again with no real clear outcome, then every time they do, the chances of hearing no go up. It just is how this works, unfortunately. And as content folks, we get told no a lot. It's really easy to be told no when you're managing a content team if you can't say, look, I'm going to make you more money. Look, this is why this answer is right. So what do we do to enable that? Well, a lot of us write stories. And a particular story helps quite a great deal in these types of situations. Tell me, what is it that you need? What are you going to do with it? And what outcome do you expect? And if you can change your stories into something like this, then you're going to get a lot more when you ask, because this story is a revenue equation. When I look at stories like this, I can say, look, I understand what you need. I understand the activity that you're going to follow, and I see this potential outcome. I hope it's a good one, right? If it's positive ROI, then you've got a better chance of success. But if you don't have this at all, then people don't know. Where are you going with this? And again, the most likely answer is no. So we don't want that answer, right? We need to turn that answer around. And there's easily more than this, but if we look at the 2 basic options, I want to take dollars being spent away, well, that's usually easier than the other option. I want to add dollars through content alone. And there are some ways of adding dollars through content alone. We've certainly heard about some today, but they aren't easy. So let's start with easy, right? You just have to convince someone to give it to you. And when I get asked for these things, it's usually not in the language that I need to go and ask in. So we're good at some things, especially the marketing folks in the audience. What's my target market? Who's inside that market? How do they react to this type of terms, this usage, these structures? How can I get my message to resonate with them and get something out of them that I need? So target that market, right? You're good at it. Is it your customer market? Well, it's a customer market, and it's an important customer because they have a checkbook that you need. When I was young, I would ask questions like, hey, can I have $25,000 for a new help system? And I would get told, no. No, you can't, Ben. That sounds like a bad plan. Maybe this was just a dream. Or maybe I hadn't learned to ask these questions in a way that made the answer become yes. So if I break this down into really, what do I want 25 grand for? This actually turns out to be a great math problem. This would be something that people should want to fund, but it's not such a super amazing win that it's a no-brainer to pull the trigger. This is good, but you might lose in prioritization depending on how big your organization is, right? Got a lot of other stuff to get done. This sure looks cool, but I've got something over here that's going to make more sense. But if you can't see that there's a positive outcome, then you should probably not ask, right? It's just not worth it. So other things that we look at all the time and don't necessarily notice and are huge cost to us are the things that other people are doing to provide information across our organizations. So these are not my numbers. These are not PayPal numbers. These are numbers that you can find on the web. These are generic. You guys can find your numbers. They're not hard. There's someone in your organization who knows this stuff. And when we look at these questions, again, there's some easy answers that pop out. If I'm going to spend some time in my content organization to reduce the amount of frustrated customers who call the organization, was probably a great premise, right? But is there really money in it? Is it really going to be worth it over time? And are these teams going to want to play ball with me? Because if I go to support and say, hey, I want to mess with all your content. Whoa, you do? Hey, I want to make our customers happier with us. I want to drive more revenue. I want to drive your call volume down, and I've got a plan. That sounds a lot more interesting, doesn't it? Product defects, a lot of us work on product. A lot of the Acrolinx customers are product customers. And if you go through some long build process, you know how hard it is to fix minor things that you found afterwards. And for us, it's PayPal. A grammatical error might not be that big of a deal. We've got a lot of users who are reading at about a 5th grade level, reading, and that's okay. But a punctuation error, what if I put a period in the wrong place in your balance? So to us, that's a pretty major issue, more major than it might be to other people. And you should also look at what these defects are really worth to you, because each brand is different. Your brand promises something different than ours, and your defects really should cater to what you're promising folks. Is this important about what my promise was or not? And if it wasn't, throw it away. So a lot of questions. We also need to make sure we're doing some other stuff. Can I buy this more effectively than doing it myself is a really popular question for big companies. And a lot of us work at places where we might have folks that come in and work for another organization to clean things, to cook food. And these are obvious things. But you might work at some place where your IT department aren't employees, or you work at a little company and you don't actually have one. I don't manage my own Outlook server, I outsource that. I don't manage my own domain authentication, I outsource that. That's not my core business. So really think about what you're good at. What is your core business? Or what should I not do? Can I buy this from someone who's going to be better at it than I am? Can I buy it from someone else more cost effectively than producing it myself and gain the same output that I'm after? Can I create the same balance as if I did it myself? Other ideas. Where should I be getting this done? Different places have a different cost base. That's obvious. That's not necessarily what I mean. Different places have a very different cultural point of view and very different capabilities of what they can and cannot get done, and even what they're allowed to do for people in other places of the world versus local and global. And we have that problem quite a great deal. We've got over 100 employees in our organization, some of which may work for the globe, some of which may work for this locale only. And so there's a lot of legal ramifications that you need to consider about where, and just looking at it from a cost perspective is actually not a good viewpoint. It's very limited, and you're going to find a lot of trouble lies in there. Am I saving time in my process? So the cost of friction. Should I deploy an end-to-end workflow management solution? Well, that's a very expensive, time-consuming thing to deploy, but some people do. Why would they do such a thing? There's a huge amount of waste in the process. For me to talk to the other folks on our team, for them to talk to the next downstream step, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can't scale unless you start doing some automation. You can't really automate unless you have standards. And so all of these things are predicates to, am I spending way too much money getting this done? Or can I standardize? And I'm not saying that you guys, we're all going to wear a one-size-fits-all shoe. It's a complete joke. But let's all shop at a shoe store. That shouldn't be that hard. And so in a large organization like PayPal, where we're dealing with dozens or hundreds rather of engineering teams, marketing support, et cetera, there's no way I'm going to get them all to wear the same shoe. It's just not feasible. But at least I can bring them all to the same shoe store, where I've got a couple of brands that I hope they're going to like. And realistically, can I scale to get this done everywhere that I need to? I'll give you an example. We have a build and test process that allows us to build during the California day. We test functionally in Asia. Is everything working? Everything's great. We do content review in Europe. And the folks coming in San Jose the following morning have 2 complete days of effort that have been completed on their work. Instead, I could do that next task in San Jose, and then I could look at the words after functional test happens to make sure I can get to them, right? Now I can only get 2 test runs a week done. In fact, not even quite 2. So it was much more effective to do this at a follow the sun, round-the-clock model, and return an enormous amount of additional value to the company. It also reduces our time to market very much. So it created revenue by getting revenue products out earlier. And this is another area that you should really consider when building these models. I want to get this stuff done. Well, a really good reason to do that is because I can make all of that money now instead of waiting. And that's a great source of additional revenue. Also, a lot of the time folks go, I'm going to do this, it's going to save us some money. Okay, but I'm going to spend a bunch of money to save that. Is it still worth it? Or I'm going to do this and we're going to make more money. Hey, that's cool too. How much is it going to cost us to make that? So don't look at those as individual goals. The individual goal, if you wanted to have one, is can I make the space between that top line and that bottom line larger? And that creates opportunity at your company all the time. Because if the top and bottom lines go up at the same rate, you really haven't won anything. So Tyson hit on some stuff earlier, which was to start small, build some success, and grow that. And so collecting data and making sure that you've done that enables you to grow again. If you try and attack a huge problem, like Nestle, 333,000 people, you're not going to get there very fast. If the cost to prevent a really small problem is a seventh or less of the cost to none, just fix it, honestly. And if you're working on something where it's going to be 2 years and you're going to be break even at the end, walk away. You've got something else that's probably much more worth your time. The problem is nearly everything that we want to do is in between these two gateposts. These are just basic MBA stuff, right? Find it on Google, go to a business class. Not rocket science again. So when you have these problems, other people have these problems typically. In a large organization, you need to find the right people to partner with to achieve goals that you have. And if you're working in these large companies, you usually have the same problems that you had in small ones. I want to deploy a tool, a person, a team, a new office, right? I want something. And I need to define what is it going to get me? What is it going to cost me? What is it going to save me? And then if I think about what is the impact to my organization, who else is impacted by these things? If I go back to the first three questions after I say, well, who else in my org will be impacted by this? Those are probably your friends. Other people who spend any kind of money on producing content for others to consume, or just hanging out in meetings about it, like I do. These are folks who have the same problems and the same needs that you do. So this should instantly be your short list. These are folks that I should be able to collaborate with and reach my goals. I think one of my slides is missing. We're going to go back. All right. Sorry about that. Okay. So most of us, maybe all of us, get stuck in funding at some point. And I'm going to ask you to do something different than a lot of folks I think have done in the past. Stop backing down. Stop taking no for an answer. Stop being easy to be told no as a content organization. Make my life harder. Please, please, because your brand needs you. It really does. It's worth it. This is one of the major assets that your company, if it's a large company, writes down in their ledger as something that you own, as something of huge value. And your content has a massive impact on that one item on your ledger in a very different way than releasing a new product, writing additional code, coming out with new lines of business. Your brand still applies to all of those things. Your brand needs you. Stand up and fight for it. Why? Well, I told you I wouldn't focus on a little brains on graphs. Here's one side of graphs. If you're worried that there's no value in this stuff, there is. There's a huge amount of value. And when you go global, like big companies, then that value increases at a rate that most people don't expect, frankly. So we work with a couple analyst houses. We've talked about Gartner Forrester a little bit earlier. We also work with the Common Sense Advisory. They had some pretty graphics around this that we've been talking about lately with them. As we look at other ways to increase PayPal's value, there's a lot of correlation between what we're doing and what other companies have done. If you're doing this locally, you should plan to scale. This is the reward for doing so. If you want to have one of the top 100 companies in the earth, you can't do that solely focused on your local market. It's just not possible. And as soon as you start scaling into your local domain, then you should think about how am I going to scale this internationally? Well, I make great English now. How many other countries can I ship English into? What do I need to change about this English to do that? Well, I make some French now. Awesome, awesome. How can I maximize the value of this French return? And how can I get that out very, very quickly? So our organization supports over 500 engineering teams, and they release daily, they release sprintly, they release weekly, they release monthly, they release ad hoc because we had some new exciting regulatory change to comply with. That's PayPal. But it's worth it. It's worth it because these are the results that we see. So stop backing down, get your needs met, make friends inside your organization, and be part of this graph. Thank you.